Hi everybody, welcome back. So in the two previous videos, I talked about money, the structure of the Federal Reserve. In the second video, we talked about the Federal Reserve policy tools, and we started talking about money market, and we talked about the demand for money in the previous video. In this video, I'm going to talk about money market, and this time we're going to talk about the supply of money. Supply of money is nothing but the relationship between the nominal interest rate that we defined in the previous video and the quantity supplied of money, basically. Instead of having a typical shape of upward slope for our supply here, we have a vertical supply. So we have kind of a unique shape for our supply of money. And the reason we have this vertical supply here is that the quantity supplied of money at the given time is fixed by the Federal Reserve. So the only authority that can change the supply of money is the Federal Reserve in United States or in any other countries. So no matter what the nominal interest rate as that we defined in the previous chapter is in the money market, the quantity of money supplied is fixed. Okay, so the only authority that can change the supply of money is the Federal Reserve. With all those policy tools that we discussed, the Federal Reserve can change this supply of money. So we basically defined the Federal Reserve policy tools in the previous video to see how those policy tools can change the supply of money. Because as soon as we change the supply of money in the market, the interest rate will change, okay? That's how the Federal Reserve can control the money market. So don't forget, the supply of money is vertical, and the demand in this market, in the money market, is downward slope. So if we put them together, just like chapter 3 or our chapter 12, we can define our market equilibrium. So the market equilibrium is coming from the intersection of our vertical MS, money supply, and our downward slope MD, money demand. At the equilibrium, we have an equilibrium interest rate, and we have an equilibrium quantity of money. Okay. Now, let's say the Federal Reserve wants to increase the interest rate. Okay. The goal of Federal Reserve is to increase the interest rate. Federal Reserve can easily reduce the supply of money, the vertical MS, okay, and increase the interest rate without changing the MD. Remember, MD changes when we change our behavior toward money, individuals, businesses, firms, okay? The shift in supply of money is just like chapter 3, just like ADAS, aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. If if the money supply increases, we have a rightward shift. If the money supply decreases, we have a leftward shift. So the example that we're talking about here is when the supply of money is decreasing and shifting to the left. So if you look at the graph in the lecture note, we have a vertical supply of money. We're shifting it to the left. Our MD, which is downward slope, is fixed. So we should find our new equilibrium. And at the new equilibrium, you can see that the interest rate is increasing. If we do the inverse, if the Federal Reserve increases the supply of money, then the interest rate will go down. So kind of easy to remember. There is an inverse relationship between the supply of money and interest rate. If the Federal Reserve wants to increase the interest rate, we have to reduce the supply of money. If the Federal Reserve wants to reduce the interest rate, we have to increase the supply of money. They move in the opposite direction, okay? So now let's see how the Federal Reserve can increase the supply of money or decrease the supply of money. Remember the Federal Reserve policy tools? We had required reserve ratio, we had discount rate, and we had open market operation. So now let's say the Federal Reserve wants to increase the interest rate. We know now if the Federal Reserve wants to increase the interest rate, the Federal Reserve should reduce the supply of money. How? Three tools. Let's start with required reserve ratio. The Federal Reserve can reduce the supply of money by increasing the required reserve ratio. The Federal Reserve can force the commercial banks and credit unions to keep more money at the Federal Reserve. And to find this money, the commercial banks and credit unions, thrift institutions should go and ask their customers, right? They should find a way to collect more money from people in the money market. So when they grab this money, what is happening to the supply of money in the market? The supply of money is going down. If the supply of money goes down, the interest rate will increase. So that's one way. Second way, by changing the discount rate. Discount rate was the interest rate on the loans that the commercial banks can get directly from the Federal Reserve. If the Federal Reserve wants to reduce the supply of money, the Federal Reserve should increase the discount rate, make it more expensive for the commercial banks to borrow money from the Fed. By increasing the discount rate, the Federal Reserve is going to basically discourage commercial banks from borrowing money from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve wants basically the banks to borrow from each other or to borrow money from their investors, from their customers, basically. Another way to reduce the supply of money is to make these commercial banks to provide money from somewhere else, from a bank who has excess reserve, or from the money market directly. So one more time, the supply of money will go down and the interest rate will increase, okay? Because if the supply of money reduces, we have a leftward shift in money supply, so the interest rate will increase. Look at the graph. And another way that the Federal Reserve can reduce the supply of money is through the open market operation. Remember, in open market operation, the Federal Reserve can use the asset, which is the government securities, right, to control the supply of money. Since the Federal Reserve wants to reduce the supply of money, the Fed is going to sell these government securities in the open market operation, which is going to happen in the open market to public. So the Federal Reserve is going to sell government securities to people, to individuals, to businesses, to big firms, and in return, the Federal Reserve is going to give you the government securities, and in return, you're going to give your money to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is collecting money from everybody, right? So another way to reduce the supply of money is by selling these securities, government securities. Again, there's no transaction happening between the Federal Reserve and federal government here. The Federal Reserve owns these government securities, and this time the Federal Reserve is going to sell them to people, okay? So the supply of money, one more time, is going down. Our interest rate is going up. You can think about the opposite case when the supply of money is going up and the interest rate is going down. It's exactly the opposite, okay? So that's about the supply of money and how the Federal Reserve policy tools work. You can skip the rest of the chapter, which are about the theory of money. I won't ask any question. If you are an econ major, you'll learn more about them, but no question will be on the test from this part. And also there won't be any question on macroeconomic approaches, classical and Keynesian, if there is any. I forgot to double check before recording my video, but if you see anything about it, you can skip that part. So that was pretty much it about chapter 12. Remember, sorry, chapter 14. Remember, it's a kind of long chapter, but remember to study the key points that I explained in the videos. Okay, 3 videos, watch them, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.